Warmworks, who are we? What are we all about? We're a partnership between Changeworks, who Morag works for, the Energy Saving Trust, and Everwarm. Changeworks has been around for about, 35 years, Morag? And they have been delivering some phenomenal environmental and energy transport waste work over that long period. Based in Edinburgh, just opposite our offices in New Haven, but also have an office up north in Inverness. Changeworks are also the home of the Edinburgh Lothians and Borders and Highlands and Islands Home Energy Scotland teams, and Morag will talk to you more about that. Energy Saving Trust, they are probably the longest serving environmental NGO in the UK. They were established after the World Summit in 1992, if you remember that far back. I certainly do. And Everwarm, who are probably the biggest installer of domestic energy efficiency measures in Scotland, and are also part of the SureServe group, which is a London-based company. So it's a very unique grouping, and we've been going for about 6 years, established in 2015. We were set up and established to tender for the Scottish Government's Warmer Homes Scotland scheme, which is the Scottish Government's flagship scheme for helping people who are in or at risk of fuel poverty. So that's people who are on welfare benefits, and to qualify you have to be on certain passport benefits, and whose homes are inefficient according to the Energy Performance Certificate or energy rating, which many of you will have in your own house. So far we've supported well over 25,000 households, and after year 3, we went to the government and said, look, we've done such a good job. Our KPIs are so high, our customer satisfaction ratings, 99%, 100% most quarters, most months. Can we expand the business given the need for carbon saving initiatives in the domestic sector? So the government said yes, and now we've got contracts up and down the country from Orkney to London. We've just won a huge contract in London with the 40 London Borough Councils. We're also delivering schemes in the Borders and the Fleece and Galloway battery projects, storage battery for social housing, which has had a really big impact, heat pump, underfloor insulation, and watch this space, because I think we're going to be winning more contracts as the time goes by. We work very closely with, in Scotland anyway, with 25 small to medium enterprises, which are the backbone of the economy. Without them, we just wouldn't be able to function. These are predominantly family-based businesses working in their own localities and delivering all sorts of measures, predominantly heating measures. It was very much dominated by gas boilers, but now we're moving more into heat pumps and renewables and heat recovery systems and all sorts of things, as well as insulation, of course. As part of the contract for Warmer Homes Scotland, and this is where my role comes in, we deliver a range of community benefits. Now, traditionally, those are all about employment and training, but also wider benefits. And then we work very, very closely with Home Energy Scotland, who refer all of the Warmer Homes Scotland customers to us. And that's the only route that you can go through. And Morag will talk to you about that in greater detail later on. We're very proud of the process that we have in place. I don't think that you really would get this level of customer service in any other energy provider. We have obviously the starting point, which is Home Energy Scotland, to refer to us. They book our surveyors who go out and survey the house. They do a full energy performance certificate, and then they recommend the householder various measures that will help them to increase their SAP rating, their energy performance rating. And the customer then has to agree that those measures are the best for that particular house. 85% of our customers get 100% grant support, and that can be up to, in one case, I think up to about £20,000 worth of work. The average grant is probably around about 4,000 or 5,000, depending on the appropriate measures, and you can get multiple measures. We then, after the technical survey, after the initial survey, we then appoint a subcontractor who goes out and does a more in-depth technical survey to make sure that these measures are indeed applicable doable in the home, and there are no other issues that we have to contend with. And then we carry out the works. We have certain KPIs that we have to adhere to, and then an inspection of the work from our internal inspections team. A customer satisfaction survey is completed, and then we do a full annual service 12 months later if it's a boiler or a renewable system. And the government also audit us. I think it's up to 20% site visits, and 100% of the installations will get some form of paper audit from Pennington Choices. So you don't see this type of approach, certainly not as comprehensive as this in any other energy scheme, although other schemes do have obviously quality assurance attached to them, like the energy company obligation, which we all pay for. And you may have seen in Linlithgow a company advertising its services, a company called EcoSave. They are getting funding from the energy company obligation, which we all pay for in the back of our bills. And you may get approached by other installers who might be on our supply chain, might not be. But these are other schemes, and Morag will go on to talk about the Home Energy Scotland loans that are available as well, part grant, part loan scheme. But I think this scheme is really the premium quality scheme in Scotland. It doesn't exist in England or Wales, incidentally. The UK and the Welsh governments do their own thing, and the Northern Irish government. In terms of community benefits, which is where my role comes in, every quarter I monitor how the supply chain is doing in terms of jobs, training, apprenticeships, SVQs, things like that. We're proud to say that so far we've employed nearly 150 apprentices and pre-apprentices across Scotland through ourselves and the supply chain, and that is basically your business support type roles in the office, whether it's customer service or the essential administrative work that has to go alongside all the installations. And that's just as important as the actual installations themselves. Without the paperwork, none of this happens. There has to be a paper trail, especially when you're dealing with very vulnerable people. There's about 500 core jobs approximately serving the contract at any one time, but of course we're now doing other contracts beyond that. So we've now reached about 100 employees in our own company, and then, as I say, probably at least 400 jobs out there in the supply chain, covering all of the projects that we do in Warmer Homes Scotland. We have an enabling fund, which we get from SGN, Scotia Gas Networks, and Scottish Southern Electricity Power Networks. And that enables the 15% of customers who don't get the 100% support to top up if they're not eligible for the Energy Saving Trust interest-free loan. Maybe they don't have a bank account. A lot of people in poverty or with mental health problems, whatever, they might struggle with all of this stuff. They might not have the facility to do that, and so we have this little pot of money that we can plug, and also to help with things like decluttering homes. A lot of people that we help have got hoarding issues or organizational difficulties. And we need to declutter their lofts or the whole house even. There may be problems with lifting laminate floors and replacing carpets or damp proofing and things like that. And so these ancillary or additional measures have to be paid for, and often the customers, they can't even afford a couple of £100. The average that we spend is about £200-300 on these situations. Some people need thousands of pounds of support, and some have got dilapidation issues, so they need further support beyond that, which you can get from things like the care and repair service from your local authority, etc. Going back to the I've not ordered this very well, but going back to the employability initiatives, this year or last year, around about April time, we launched our own Warm Start initiative, which was a kind of an approach to try and bring in young people into our industry. You may be aware that the Scottish Government and the UK Government have got these very bold, ambitious targets to get us to net zero by the middle of the century. I think the Scottish Government is 2045, UK Government is 2050. In order to do that, we're going to need to expand our workforce massively. and we have to bring through the young blood. And indeed, many youngsters have missed out on employment opportunities because of COVID. So we took the view that we should be doing more about this. The UK government launched its Kickstart scheme, Kickstart UK scheme, which was to help young people who are unemployed between 16 and 24 on universal credit. And they give employers a subsidy, wage subsidy up to 25 hours. So we've managed to get several of those in through our supply chain. And then the Scottish Government launched its Young Persons Guarantee, which is a more holistic approach, longer term, 18-month approach to this, which also involves the Kickstart scheme. So we've built on these government initiatives, and we're bringing in young people from different walks of life, different routes. This chap here, young Stephen Gray, actually came as a graduate. He was desperate to get into our industry, and he managed to land a job as a customer service advisor or officer. And we're delighted to get him on board as our first warm start in Warmworks. So that's an initiative that may grow as the months go by. Another thing that we do is support the Trussell Trust and food banks. We've had a partnership for just about 3 years now, and we've done lots of fundraising, lots of fun events, bagging Monroes and five-a-side tournaments and personal challenges and dry Januaries and Movembers and all these things. So we've managed to raise well over £6,000 so far. I know that Changeworks does a lot of fundraising as well, and maybe Morag will chat about that. So, we're going to continue doing that. And every year we have a vote on the charity of choice. So we'll see what happens with that. Another thing we do as a company, we mentor young people. So you may have heard of a wonderful charity based in Glasgow called Mcr Pathways, started by the founder, Ian McRitchie. And basically, what it is, it's a voluntary service where the charity brings in volunteers from all walks of life, might be retired people, young people that are still in work, and they dedicate 1 hour a week to a young person who's maybe been through the looked after system, the care system, and they're maybe struggling at school. They're not getting a lot of parental support or involvement. Maybe they don't have any parents. What they've found is by having a person they can rely on, that can build a relationship with them, they get fantastic outcomes. They almost double the outcomes that they would normally expect, either in terms of grades, hires, standard qualifications, or going to college, securing a job or whatever. So I've been doing it for a number of years now. I'm on to my third young person. My MD he's on to his second, and then we have a few other employees that are doing it, and also our supply chain. It's a fantastic thing, and I would recommend any of you to sign up for it. Another thing that we do, and of course Morag does a hell of a lot of this in her job as well, is partnership working with lots of different organisations across Scotland. One of the most recent ones is Scottish Fire and Rescue. Now, they have recognised that people in fuel poverty are often at the highest risk of fires. Scotland has double the death rate in domestic fires compared to England. And the reason for this is probably quite complex. It's to do with mental health, maybe the dreich weather, I don't know, drugs, alcohol misuse, smoking, and all those sorts of things. So we're now trying to work together to deal with both things, fire risk and fuel poverty at the same time. And we're working with Morag's team up north to look at a pilot for training staff on both sides. So watch this space. And by the way, any householder in Scotland can get a free fire audit in their home. So you can ring up Fire and Rescue, and they'll send out their community fire safety officers to your home, and they can do that audit. Obviously, there's been changes to the fire alarm regulations as well, so things that you might need to do in your house anyway. Another thing we've been doing recently is a big focus on wellbeing. We have a Warmworks wellbeing initiative for our employees, and we've done some mental health training through the Scottish Association of Mental Health, and very, very acutely aware now, given the pandemic, that mental health issues are on the rise. If you want any more information about our company, I would say get onto our website, have a look at our case studies. Some of these case studies, which we do in tandem with Morag's team, are just incredible. The transformation that, having a new heating system can have, or, a warm home to someone's life is really, often understated in terms of the health impact, mental and physical. So have a wee look at those and familiarise yourself with them. And then I'll talk to you later about the community stuff that we're doing in Linlithgow. So without further ado, unless there are any burning questions, I'm going to hand over to Morag.
So yeah, my name's Morag Cockburn. I'm the Senior Partnerships Officer with Home Energy Scotland. So just going to give you a very quick overview of Home Energy Scotland, who we are and kind of how we work with Warmworks on this great service that Neil's described. So we are funded by Scottish Government, and we're delivered by the Energy Saving Trust, who Neil's already mentioned. We're a national service. We have 5 local advice centres, which are based throughout Scotland. Myself, I work in the South East Centre, so we cover Edinburgh, Fife, the Lothians and the Scottish borders. In the South East and also in the Highlands and Islands, our contract is delivered by Changeworks. So that makes Changeworks my employer, but also they are a key partner of ours, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a bit. So first and foremost, we are an advice service. We provide advice to householders on a range of topics from energy efficiency, renewable technologies, water efficiency and transport. We do this mainly through our inbound phone line. So we have a free phone number that anyone can call. And our advisors are all set up working from home. They have been since the beginning of lockdown and able to answer calls as they normally would. We also do a number of outbound calls as well. So for example, if there was a criteria change in the funding that was available, we might look back on our database and see who then has become eligible and actually proactively contact them, follow up with them, provide more advice. We've also really developed our email advice service. This was always part of our plan, but I think it's been expedited a little bit through lockdown. So people who perhaps prefer not to engage on the phone, they can receive our full service through email as well, including being referred for Warmer Home Scotland. Normally, we'd be out and about doing events and outreach, and as you can imagine, we're really missing this side of our work. We've been able to get back to a little bit of it at various points over the past 2 years, but really keen to get back to that as soon as possible. We cover, as you can see, quite a vast geographical area. We can't ever be everywhere at once, and that's really why we rely on partnerships. But just being able to get out and about in the communities, I don't think you can beat it really. And on that note, we do a number of home visits to people as well. And again, that's been kind of on and off as it's been allowed. So the home visits would occur in 3 situations. The first is through our energy carer team. So our energy carers are there to support, I guess, the most vulnerable householders or people who would struggle to engage with our service in other ways. So perhaps there's a language barrier or they're struggling with their mental health. Our energy carers would pick up those householders and, in an ideal world, do a home visit with them. During sort of more intense lockdowns, they've been able to perhaps spread it over a number of interactions, engage via video link or using interpreters, including sign language interpreters. Then we also have our technical teams. So they're there for houses which are perhaps a bit older, a bit non-traditional, hard to treat properties which need that kind of technical expertise, or for householders who are interested in installing renewable technology. So our technical team can do a home visit. They can produce a report on what measures would be suitable for that property, what the impact in terms of carbon saving and financial savings would be, and what funding is available for those householders. And then finally, we also have a private sector landlord specialist. So there are upcoming changes to legislation with regards to private rented properties. So they will be expected to meet certain EPC or energy performance certificate bandings. And our PSL specialist, private sector landlord specialist, is there to support those landlords to navigate those changes in legislation. So again, they can provide overviews of the properties that a landlord has, what measures need done to meet those regulations, and what funding's available. And then on to, oh yeah, we're there. Thanks, Neil. Sorry, it's the funding slide with all the orange. That's the one, thank you. So Home Energy Scotland, as Neil mentioned, we're the main route to Warmer Home Scotland. We're the only place to find out about all the Scottish Government funding options for energy efficiency and some for transport. So It's the role of our advisors to present all the relevant options and, if appropriate, to then refer the person and explain the next steps. So there's quite a lot of obscure funding schemes that I've popped on this slide that I'm not going to go into any detail, but just to kind of show you the range of funding that our advisors are dealing with and connecting people with. But the two that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail are Warmer Homes Scotland and the Home Energy Scotland loans. So on to Warmer Homes Scotland. Perfect. So Neil's already covered in quite a lot of detail what Warmer Homes Scotland actually is. It's funding for measures including insulation, central heating, draft proofing, glazing, renewables, and it's really designed that's all the furniture in, sorry. So it's really designed for those who are most at risk of a cold home. So that might be vulnerabilities due to age or illness or having young children in the home. And typically, as Neil says, they will benefit from around £5,000 worth of energy saving measures. So a combination of measures, but often it can be considerably more than that. And it leaves homes on average 20% more efficient. So it can have a real difference to the people that benefit from the scheme and help to make their bills lower as well for them. So I'll not talk any more about that, but obviously if there's any questions at the end and between Neil and myself, I'm sure we can answer them. So there is, as you can imagine, criteria that goes along with the Warmer Homes Scotland scheme, and that relates to the property itself and also to the people living in the property, whether there's benefits coming in, that sort of thing. So for people that perhaps don't qualify for that grant funded support, but they're still interested in making their homes more efficient, then the Scottish Government has provided an interest-free loan. So that just really helps to spread the cost of these measures over a number of years interest-free. So there is £15,000 available, a total spread across different measures for energy efficiency measures. And some of these come with cashback of 40%. So if you take the example of insulation, if somebody was looking to insulate their home and they took out an energy efficiency loan from Home Energy Scotland, 40% of that loan they wouldn't need to repay. It would essentially be grant funded. And then with renewables, kind of given us an indication of where Scottish Government is going with the net zero targets that Neil mentioned. There is loan funding of up to 17,500, again spread across different measures. And the cashback currently on renewable heating options, so for example, an air source heat pump, is up to 75% cashback. So what that means is if somebody borrowed £10,000 to install an air source heat pump in their property, they're only actually paying back 2,500 of that. So what it's doing is really making an air source heat pump a viable option for people. It's bringing it kind of in line with the cost of replacing a gas boiler. So it's a great option for somebody perhaps moving off an inefficient oil system, but also for people who want to get away from gas. And certainly that is the direction of travel. So yeah, there's lots of things to be aware of in terms of the loan, but that's all something that our advisors would discuss with people. They would talk about the criterias and the processes and everything else with the person. So my role as Senior Partnerships Officer is about, firstly, spreading the word of Home Energy Scotland and what we do, trying to make sure that our advisors are as busy as possible, not that they really need my help with that at the moment. And connecting with organisations. As I say, we have a huge geographical reach and we can't be everywhere at once. So how do we work with organisations who are there in the communities and able to spread the word with us and for us? We also want to make sure that our advisors are aware of what support is out there in the communities. So if we're speaking to somebody who is in fuel poverty, it's unlikely that that's the only problem they're experiencing. So we need to be aware of what other support services are out there working and how we can connect and signpost people to those services. So a lot of my work is around tackling fuel poverty. It's about connecting with charities, with the NHS, with local authorities, with community groups, to make sure that they can signpost or even refer people to us for support. So we do have a referral mechanism in place. We have a portal online, which is really simple. It's essentially just an online form, and partners can input the details of the householder that needs help, and it will immediately enter our database for follow-up. The partner can also then check back to see how quickly we have got back to the person, and also any kind of top level outcomes. So if that person was then referred to Warmer Homes Scotland, the partner can download a report that shows them that, and they can use it for their own reporting as well. So some of the other ways that we can support partner organisations, community groups, everyone like that, is through supporting funding applications. We can provide letters of support and work with them on actually delivering some of the project through workshops. So we can provide training for staff and for volunteers, or we can provide workshops for the wider public, workshops including energy efficiency, water efficiency, transport. We even have one around sort of food waste as well. And we would also normally be out and about at sort of roadshow type events, having a stall, talking to people there. We've been moving a lot of this type of activity online, doing lots of virtual workshops and webinars and presentations, but hopefully soon enough we can get back to face-to-face work. And then finally, just a slide about how to get in touch with us. As I mentioned, most of our traffic, if you like, comes in through our free phone number, and you are able to select, where you live geographically. So you would end up speaking to somebody in the Southeast Centre, so that it's more tailored to your area. So free phone number. As I say, we can engage via email, and you can request that just on our website there. And we do also have our online referral portal. So I guess for everybody here today, if you perhaps work or volunteer with an organisation where the people you're engaging with would benefit from Home Energy Scotland support, then do consider spreading the word about our referral portal. And it's really quick and easy to get signed up and to make referrals, and it certainly is well used at the moment, with all the concerns in the news about energy bills and such like. But then also for yourselves and your own properties, if it's something you've been thinking about and you'd like some specialist advice from our advisors or our technical team, then please do get in touch, and we can take it from there. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Morag. That was great. Always good to refresh my own aging memory regarding all the services that you guys provide. It is such an array, and we've been very grateful in our community, with my community hat on, for the support that we've had over the years. In terms of the different energy and environmental events. I mean, going back 12 years, even before we arrived in Linlithgow, I know that Linlithgow Climate Challenge was working with you. So that's great. I mean, I don't have any specific slides in terms of the local community work. Perhaps John and your group there might want an additional presentation if you can withstand my dulcet tones another time, and I can talk to you in much greater detail about the work of Linlithgow Community Development Trust and Linlithgow Solar. But there is a connection because both of our agencies, from a professional perspective, are reaching out to communities across the land, and it's all kind of overlapping. And energy is a very complex subject. I mean, I probably only know about 10% of what you need to know in this industry. There's so much to it, whether it's to do with tariffs, or renewables, or different measures, keeping up with all the latest technology, and of course, as Morag has said, the different grant schemes and loan schemes, and they're constantly changing. So keeping up with it is a full-time job in itself. So we will do our best as professionals and volunteers in our community to signpost you, and we tend to know people that will have the answer. whether that's within the utility sector or, you know, our specialist installers or some other advisor, either within our teams or outside. So we usually can get the answer to you. So, I mean, this is a bit of a hobby of mine. You know, I was fortunate enough to go to university and study environmental science many years ago. And it's always been close to my heart, growing up as a wee laddie in Cumbernauld and, you know, fledging the nest, getting off to uni in England, living in Greece, coming back here, and then eventually arriving in Linlithgow, and where I discovered actually that my great-grandfather was a coal miner in Armadale. And at that time it was the Royal Borough of Linlithgowshire. And so in some ways this is the new coal, you know. So I'd like to think that I'm sort of keeping that heritage going. So it really is, you know, very much a case of coming back home. And so, you know, I really enjoy helping anyone who has an energy query, whether it's a business or a community group or an individual household. Through the CDT, we also offer thermal imaging surveys and advice through myself, or, you know, indeed if we need support from Morag's team or any other agencies, we'll signpost you on. We have done the first 2 phases of Linlithgow Solar as well, which is an innovative social community energy enterprise that basically helps to install solar PV on roofs, save the energy users money and carbon, and then generate a surplus for the community. We've also managed to fund the schemes, the first 2 phases, through a community bond, which is an innovative financial mechanism whereby people can invest anything from £50 upwards for a modicum amount of interest over a certain period that they choose, 5, 8, 11 years in the first 2 instances. And then we're hoping to expand this particular scheme. So as I say, I can talk to you about that till the cows come home on another occasion. We are looking to work with other communities, and at the same time try and benefit the more low-income areas, and also where there's, you know, needs from specific householders, we can refer them on to Home Energy Scotland, and perhaps some of these individuals will get access to the various grants, including Warmer Home Scotland. So we're trying to join the dots as much as possible, and especially, you know, since the pandemic and many people losing their jobs, put on furlough or whatever, you know, the business is collapsing. You know, I think, you know, we're going to go through a bit of a perfect storm, to be honest, especially with the energy price rises. I mean, in my situation, our bill went up 40% overnight because we were with the People's Energy Company, and they went bust, and we were transferred over to Centrica British Gas, and our tariff went from 14 pence to 20. So 40% increase overnight. We had actually gone to full electricity from gas, get rid of our gas for environmental reasons, but then had this nasty surprise where, you know, all of a sudden the bills went through the roof. And, you know, there are going to be many, you know, far more unfortunate souls who don't have income or are on benefits who are going to really struggle. And then in the summertime, Ofgem or the government are going to lift the cap on the Ofgem cap, the price cap on the energy tariffs, and it could mean, you know, £500, £550 on the average bill. Many of our customers that we currently serve are going to go back into fuel poverty. Now, obviously, having an energy efficient home is going to buffer you from some of those changes in the market, but, you know, it really is going to be a harrowing time. And I think there's going to be millions more households going back into fuel poverty, or going into fuel poverty for the first time by definition. So, you know, I think we're going to have a very busy few years to try and slow down the rate of people getting into that situation. And of course there are, you know, other societal issues, general poverty, which I think is safe to say is on the rise. So yeah, I think all of the stuff that we do hopefully makes a bit of a difference, and as I say, I'm happy to discuss some of the more local work.
All tied up in a very complex network of things relating to financial aspects of the cost of things, but also climate change and carbon emissions and so on and so forth. So there's a great wide minefield that's coming to hit us right in the face, I think. And what we ought to have done was done something about 20 years ago to deal with it, but we haven't. So, so we're stuck with it.
Thank you. Big hand. Hi. Thanks, Neil, for that presentation. Very informative. Yeah, I remember being in a physics lecture in 1972 where we were discussing heat pumps. So obviously progress takes a long time to catch on. However, one thing that I wondered if you could explain to me, that the average temperature in Scotland, I would suggest, is much lower than that in England. Would we agree with that? Yeah. So basically, I've always argued the fact that in terms of assessing fuel needs, there should be a releveling of the ballpark so that in Scotland, a required fuel per annum should be a right of a resident of Scotland. And I've always argued with my English friends that when they're down in London baking, we're still going about in jerseys. So basically, I wonder if you've got any comments on that.
Well, first and foremost, I don't know if Morag wants to come in at this point as well. I'm certainly happy to answer some of that, if that's okay, Morag.
Yeah, go for it, and I'll see if I've anything
Okay.
to add.
Okay. So to move into a more kind of technical landscape, our qualified domestic energy assessors or surveyors, when they're doing their energy performance certificate survey of your house, there's a temperature factor built in, and it's part of a thing called SAP, the Standard Assessment Procedure, which was invented by a Scotsman, believe it or not, Brian Anderson, many years ago, who's now sadly passed away. He worked for the Building Research Establishment. So he wanted to find a way of actually rating a building, any building, for its energy performance, its energy efficiency. And he came up with this very, very complex system, and they can build in regional temperatures. So then that will adjust your energy rating. Now, if you don't know what that is, then look at the back of your fridge, your washing machine. You know, you'll see that A to G rating. Well, we have the same thing for our properties. It's just a bit more complex because you've got windows and doors and floors and ceilings and different appliances. So it is already built in. And, you know, in terms of the temperature differences across the country, I mean, if you look at Orkney has the highest level of fuel poverty in the UK. It's probably around about 65%. If you look at the actual bills, it's probably even further, even higher than that. But on the modelled figures, you know, the sort of scientific assessment, you know, it's very high. And that's predominantly because Orkney is one of the coldest places in the UK. So there are things that are built in already to the system. I mean, the Energy Action Scotland charity is one of our big partners. They have been campaigning against fuel poverty for about 35, 40 years now. And it's just the same old drum that gets beaten every year. Same thing, you know, and now it's going to get worse. And, you know, I would like the government, and I've been saying this myself for many years, I've been in and out the energy industry for about 20 years. I worked in England myself on fuel poverty in Sedgefield, which is Tony Blair's old authority at the time. And, you know, a lot of this stuff is just like a broken record. It just keeps going round and round and round. But I think if the government were brave enough, and I mean the UK government, they should, you know, certainly do something about the premium, the Highland and Islands premium. I mean, it's crazy when you've got people on Orkney and the Highlands and Islands who are very near some of the power sources, the wind farms, you know, the hydro stations, and yet they pay this Highland premium. It's absolutely crazy. And then people who are on prepayment meters pay an additional amount compared to those on direct debit, who normally speaking are more affluent because they have a bank account, they have a salary, etc. I mean, it's topsy-turvy. It's crazy. And they've not solved this problem. Now, Ofgem have recently put caps on prepayment, but it's I mean, Morag probably knows more about this than I do, but you know, it's absolutely, in my view, it's not enough. We need to do more for people on low incomes. Morag, do you want to come in there at all?
Well, I see George is holding up, I presume, a very recent newspaper which has captured that very thoughts. I'd be interested to know what it says.
I didn't see that, sorry.
But just to add, I think about the should help with energy bills, depends on the weather. Well, Yeah, just a couple of things that came to mind is that the definition of fuel poverty was changed in 2019, and Scottish Government came up with their own definition of fuel poverty, and it does very much relate not only to what people are spending on their bills, but to what is an acceptable temperature for them to be heating their home to, because the definition is someone who is spending more than 10% of their adjusted net income on their total energy use, not just their heating bills. And you could have somebody who's not spending that, but is sitting in a freezing cold, damp, unhealthy home. So they brought in that caveat of what is an acceptable expected temperature for a certain amount of hours per day. So certainly fuel poverty statistics should bring that in, but in terms of the funding, I don't know that it's quite caught up to take that into account. Obviously, it is just a Scottish Government fund. What was the other thing that I was thinking around the cold weather payment, which is pitiful in itself, but you know that will be triggered. And then I think just to add that Changeworks have a quite large consultancy department who are regularly commissioned to do sort of research into different topics for organisations, and I know that they have just done one into the £140 warm homes discount, and I think one of the findings was that that shouldn't be a standard amount across the whole of the UK. So watch this space for whether Scottish Government are able to introduce a more suitable version for Scotland. But yeah, it's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
okay,
well, thanks, Morag and Neil both. I think also we've got kind of spoiled a little bit, particularly those who are affluent among us. I remember my childhood, we had one fire in our house in the kitchen, and that was it. The rest of the house was freezing cold most of the time. And nowadays we've all got central heating and what have you. So those of us who think about the good old days, they weren't that good old. But nonetheless, there's a colossal divide now between those of us who can afford to heat our homes and be comfortable and the people that can't. And it's going to get worse. I think it's sad to say, but it sounds as if over the next couple of years, those people who already can't cope are going to be able to not cope even more, and that's really a big problem.
I'm still a wee bit confused with some of the names that I get bandied about. I've got Warmworks, Warmstart, Home Energy Scotland, Changeworks, Energy Savings Trust. I mean, it's a bit confusing even for me to get to grips with. But the one that was particularly on to ask Morag was, what's the relationship then with the Energy Savings Trust and the Home Energy Scotland? Are you like a sub of that, or is it an overarching title that the Energy Savings Trust is?
I'm not surprised you're confused, to be honest. So Energy Saving Trust is national. There is an Energy Saving Trust in England as well, so they're national. I guess we are the public-facing arm
Right.
for Scotland. So we connect with the householder and provide that advice. We are managed by the Energy Saving Trust. So they manage Home Energy Scotland on behalf of Scottish Government, but then the contract for actually running the day-to-day advice centre is put out to tender every however many years, and Changeworks has won that contract in the South East and in the Highlands and Islands. There's other local agencies that have won it in the other areas. So they're the managing body on behalf of the Scottish Government, and Home Energy Scotland is, I guess, a contract for public-facing advice that in this case is managed by Changeworks. And then you throw in Warmworks to the mix as well, and I'm not surprised that it is confusing. It is for myself as well, to be honest.
So in that sense then, the marketing and getting referrals is actually through yourselves?
It is, yeah. So the general public would have very little to do with the Energy Saving Trust in reality. They might have a look at their website, they write blogs, they send newsletters, but they don't really go beyond that. They do actually administer the funding. So if somebody applies for a loan and we make the referral at Home Energy Scotland, the credit checks and that side of things is done at Energy Saving Trust level, so they might have a bit of interaction with that team, but other than that, not a lot of interaction.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Morag. I'd just like to obviously clarify as well that Warmworks, which is an LLP run on a commercial basis, we do not directly market the Warmer Home Scotland scheme because it's the Scottish Government's responsibility in partnership with EST Home Energy Scotland to market that. I mean, we can promote who we are and our services, which happen to deliver Warmer Home Scotland as the managing agent. But we're not allowed to market it. I mean, I think, it came from the highest level in the land through Nicola Sturgeon that, we didn't want cold calling, because other schemes in the past, you may have had, specific contractors going around knocking on people's doors. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I actually think, personally, I think I'm in favour of that if it's done correctly, with plenty of notice for neighbourhoods and councillors and people like that. But, we didn't want to be associated with that, or the government didn't want to be associated with that, type of activity. So everything has to be promoted through the government and Home Energy Scotland, and, events like, the energy clinic we had before Christmas in the hub.
It only just highlights then that the bulk, as you're saying, of people who are in fuel poverty are the least likely to have access to internet or email or whatever. So it's obviously a big marketing exercise to target the real people you want to get to help.
Yes, and if you've got any ideas about that, obviously Morag in particular and the Scottish Government would like to hear from you about ways to do that. And I mean, it's been like this for many years. I mean, in Glasgow, for example, and Changeworks has a service, but in Glasgow they have a thing called G-Heat. So it's part funded by the council, and it's a partner organisation, Wise Group. You might have heard of the Wise Group, which is a long-standing social enterprise that helps people into employment from different vulnerable groups, ex-offenders and long-term unemployed. But they also have a Home Energy Scotland team that covers the old Strathclyde and Central, the old regional council area, and Glasgow City Council provides them with funding to go into people's homes, to those who are really vulnerable or what they call hard to reach. I don't really believe there's such a thing called hard to reach. I think if you've got people in the community that others know and trust, they'll get into their homes and they'll talk to them and they'll meet them and they'll take them through the different myriad of schemes available to them. So but yeah, if there's a different way of marketing a scheme or promoting it, absolutely. I mean, this thing that we're doing today is, one of those mechanisms. I mean, in the past, I mean, we've talked to, when I was in England, we had, different pensioners groups and, bridge clubs and, you name it. And we tried everything. And you should never kind of rely on one mechanism. Because you'll be doomed to fail if you do that.
I think partners are absolutely key for us, to find the people most in need and to connect them with us. But we do try some different sorts of marketing, and that's been kind of pushed forward with lockdown. So one of the things we tried was that kind of almost refer a friend, or spreading the words in areas. So where someone in one street had benefited from Warmer Home Scotland, then leaving them with some postcards to hand out to their neighbours that said, I've benefited from this support, why don't you give them a call, sort of thing. And I think that can help to kind of organically spread the word, especially if that person has been pleased with the result, and as Neil says, there's a really high customer satisfaction rate. So we're always up for trying different things, and we're very conscious of the digital divide, and that not everybody is online or wants to use that mechanism to connect.
I just wondered whether you had any involvement in cladding and so on, which is one of the means by which you're meant to be able to improve.
Another seminar, I think, there for the whole event. I mean, and again, I admit this is another passion of mine. Well, after Grenfell, if that's where you're going, we had a direct communication from Nicola Sturgeon to give reassurances about the cladding that we were using on our external wall insulation measures. Now, we do use it's not up to us specifically, although we can, if necessarily, step in and say we're going to change measures, and then we have to review that with the Scottish Government civil servants that oversee our contract. But because we are predominantly low-rise individual private homes, private rented and owner-occupiers, we would very rarely get involved in external wall insulation for multi-storey or high-rise. If there are flats that we deal with, it would be heating measures and things like that. But nevertheless, it was important to reassure that we had the building standards accreditations, the BBA certificates, all those things. But yeah, I mean, there is a real issue with certain high-rise, mid-rise properties across the UK, particularly those, but not only, those that have been done by private developers. I mean, I could talk to you all day about Grenfell and everything that's going on there. But, we try and work to the high standards, but it's actually up to the insulation contractors to provide the insulation supplies on the Warmer Homes Scotland scheme. We don't specify that. We have a generic approval from Building Standards Scotland, the labs office up in Livingston. So it's a kind of generic system. Personally, if it was my home, I would use more natural fibres like hemp, and I think you're going to see a huge development and expansion in that market as we move towards net zero, as we try and decarbonise the whole economy. With my Linlithgow Community Development Trust hat on, we actually did a wee thing with the local academy recently where they were involved in I don't know if you've heard of this, but they got into the finals of the Formula One in Schools competition. 3 years ago, Singapore, and then last year in Newcastle, it was a virtual one. And they came to us to say, how could we make our pit stop stand more renewable, more sustainable? And so we came up with 3 ideas: a solar charger for the LCD screen LED lights, reused wood for the frame of the pit stop exhibition stand, and some hempcrete for the table. Now, hemp is a remarkable plant, not just for medicinal and therapeutic purposes, but it has something like 25,000 products: clothing, foodstuffs, insulation, building materials, and obviously cannabinoids, which are now sweeping the States and coming into this country as remarkable therapeutic medicinal chemicals. Anyway, hempcrete is one of those. Historic Environment Scotland very much are in favour of natural fibres for insulating homes. Plus, hempcrete is fireproof. You can literally put a blowtorch on this stuff and it doesn't burn. So similar to mineral fibre, which would be the other option if you're going to insulate your home and you can't afford, because some of these they're not new, but natural insulants, more innovative insulants, they can be very expensive. Sheep's wool is probably double the cost of glass wool or mineral fibre. So if you're trying to save pennies and you're going for the less sustainable option, I would still maintain that probably mineral fibre, mineral wool is your best option because of its fire retardant properties. Doesn't melt till about 1500 degrees Celsius, whereas things like EPS, expanded or extruded polystyrene systems, phenolic foam, your Kingspan, you're probably looking at a much lower melting point of, 300-400 degrees Celsius. So, from a fire, health and safety and environmental perspective, I would go towards the other materials. But as I say, I could talk to you all day about this stuff. It's something that we talk about a lot in our community, obviously given the range of properties in Linlithgow, the different historic buildings, and so on and so forth. But yeah, cladding is definitely a measure on Warmer Homes Scotland. We do internal and external wall insulation. You will also see area-based schemes. We're doing one up in Orkney with Orkney Council. And obviously, again, you have to get the right system. You can't just slap on cladding onto any old building. You need to ensure that the moisture is not going to sit, the interstitial moisture is not going to sit within the building. You're not going to reach a dew point within the fabric. The dew point has to be external, or it will condense within the wall if the temperature falls below 10 degrees Celsius. Again, if you want more advice about this, Morag's team will help you. but also Historic Environment Scotland. They produce a lot of free technical guidelines if you go online. We've worked with a guy called Moses Jenkins and Roger Curtis, who are very familiar with all this stuff, and they produce some really good case studies. And most of the technical learnings and findings can apply to any building, and that's about getting the balance between ventilation and insulation. You've got to allow your building to breathe and use the right materials. And what we've found as well is, if you read a chap called Professor Tom Woolley, who's written a book called Thermal Insulation Properties for Building Materials, he is very much an advocate of more natural insulants, and I think you'll see an increase in those types of materials like hemp or wood fibre moving forward. So sorry for the long-winded response, but I hope that answers your question, Chris.
Neil, thank you very, very much indeed. And we're in a sort of mode just now where I think the topic's so wide that we could go on until Thursday lunchtime, which we're not going to do, I'm afraid. So unless anybody's got any really pressing issues that they want to raise at this point, I would just like to thank Morag and Neil both for a very interesting talk. It's a complex minefield of multiple organisations all working, thank goodness, working together with each other. So at least it's a connected up network of complex organisations. It's a very interesting area which is going to be with us for a very long time, I suspect. Thank you both very, very much indeed for your presentation this morning. You've given us a great deal to think about. Talking about heat pumps, I went to university in 1964. And one of our projects that we studied was the heat pump that was used to heat the Royal Festival Hall in London, which is a water-powered heat pump powered by the heat from the River Thames. So heat pumps have been around for a very, very long time. It's a no-brainer in terms of a thermal advantage. You're getting an awful lot more bang for your buck if you're going to use electricity to heat something. And I'm really surprised they haven't caught on until now, but watch this space.
Thank you.
Next meeting is in a fortnight's time. I think we're going to do that on Zoom as well. I suspect we'll be back to the Rose Social Club for the one after that. But I think the next one we should probably do on Zoom as well. And it ought to be Rona Craig talking about a trip to Antarctica. We haven't contacted Rona yet, I don't think, to find out if she can do it on Zoom. If she's prepared to do it on Zoom, then that's what it will be. If she's not prepared to do it on Zoom, we'll reschedule her to some other point in the programme and we'll get somebody else. So there'll definitely be a meeting on Zoom in 2 weeks' time, 10 o'clock on the, whatever it is, the 20-something of January, 28th, is it? 26th. 26th of January at 10 o'clock. Look forward to seeing you all then. And hopefully 2 weeks after that, we'll be back in the Rose Social Club. I really think the peak of this pandemic has passed us, and I also think that we're going to have to, all of us, just simply learn to live with the consequences of COVID. It's going to be an endemic rather than a pandemic, and we're just going to have to take whatever precautions are necessary to keep us all safe. So thanks for coming this morning, and we'll see you, look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. And if we could all show our appreciation to Morag and Neil for the presentation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
As per always, I'll put it on YouTube. It may take me a day or so to do the editing, but I'll let you know when it's on YouTube.